Okay, so in today's video, I'm touching the topic of sequence to sequence models. And for that task, I think exploring the denoising would be a better approach. And there are a bunch of models. And the first problem we can keep up with is the ECG denoising. And because we have been doing a lot of videos related to the ECG signals, so I thought it would be better to go along with the ECGs before diving into some other problem. In this paper, they mentioned I was just about to read this paper. It is from 2019, and although it is a little bit older, yeah, I want to read older papers because we want to learn something um, before things got too complicated. So how was it being done in the past years? So that's why I thought the older papers are a good choice to start with. Anyways, this paper is basically it models two kind of deep learning papers. Deep learning models. First is a convolutional neural network, a CNN, and the second one is based on the LSTM. So they talk about the two papers. CNN is applied to a noisy ECG signal, and it includes the six convolution layers. So they made the CNN with the six convolution layers for ECG denoising and subsequent pooling and a fully connected. So that's how they created a model for the ECG denoising. So six convolution layers with the subsequent pooling layer and a fully connected layer for regression. So most of the time, the fully connected layer is for regression. The second deep learning model they implemented is a long short-term memory, which is LSTM model, and it consists of two LSTM layers. They also used a wavelet technique on an empirical Bayesian method to compare the deep learning models, and they come up with that they train and tested on two synthetic datasets and the dataset containing real ECG signals. The result demonstrated that while both DL models were capable of dealing with heavy and drifting noise, the CNN models was markedly superior to the LSTM model in terms of root mean square errors, and the wavelet techniques were suitable for rejecting random noise. So that's what they suggest. And there are a lot of things we can learn from the literature which is about the topic. It is not just how they implemented some stuff. We can directly jump into the methodology and see how they work with that. But before learning about the actual models that they implemented like this in this picture, we can learn a lot of other subjects related topics on that paper. So we will try to squeeze some knowledge about the literature as much as we can. So um, let's see what they have for us in the introduction. It says that ECG signals are often affected by noise, random or deterministic, and artifacts. So yeah, these kind of noises. The noise could be a random noise, deterministic noise, or the ECG. The source of errors can be due to the various events such as movements of patient, electromagnetic noise induction, hardware nearby, or muscle contraction artifacts. So there could be a different reasons, and each kind of noise is a different in nature, and mm, we need a different kind of techniques to remove that kind of noise. But overall, what noise do, it superimpose on our actual signal, or any other signal. We could talk about any time series um, signal. For example, we can talk about the EEG. um, we can talk about real data, which is collected by the noise. So, if we study about implementing learning model or using, we could implement it in any kind of a model. Um, we could just like a deep filter net used for speech enhancement. So, speech is also so speech is also a um, real-time signal which could be used for the deep learning model. So the next thing we could see from this literature, uh, s- the electromagnetic noise induction. There in the hospital settings, there are a lot of electronic machinery used for monitoring different vitals of the patients. They are electronic machines, and they have some kind of electromagnetic inductions which could be imposed on other machines as well, although the medical grade machines are super well um, filter out for that kind of noises, but still there could be some electromagnetic noise. So this is a very complicated noise. A large number of methods to deal with noise and or artifacts from ECG have been developed. So now what we are going learning from this here, we are going to learn what kind of techniques were used before um, in the previous literatures. So a large number of methods to deal with noises and or artifacts from ECG signals have been developed, such as adaptive filters. These are the most common ones. Sometimes when we can't use complex hardwares to remove our filters, we need to stick with the old op amps and some cheap filters. So we stick with the adaptive filters or butterworth filter with the op amps. So, and the second is independent component analysis, ICA. I had uploaded a fast ICA video where I talked about these noise suppression technique, which is ICA, and we have a method of fast ICA in a fast ICA library in Python. I had talked in detail about the independent component analysis. In short, what it does, it basically breaks down our signal into independent components, and we can remove a specific component from that signal. So it not if we do a frequency domain filtration, we remove a specific frequency from the signal. So for example, if we have let's say we have a signal, and noise is a kind of specific frequency, and if we remove that frequency, for example, most common this kind of noise is 50 hertz or 60 hertz line noise, and we remove the 50 hertz or 60 hertz frequency, we'll also lose the information of any actual signal which is a 50 hertz or 60 hertz signal. But if we do an independent component analysis, we will just learn the nature of the noise, and we will decompute decompose the actual signal into multiple components, and then we will get a component of a noise, and we remove that component from that original signals. So over, even if the frequency overlapping is done, that frequency is not if that original signal also contain the similar frequency. So hopefully you get the idea of how this independent component analysis will be working. Excuse me. So, mhm. Okay. So now that independent component analysis, the next thing is empirical mode decomposition, EMD. This is another technique which is used for denoising. And then we have adaptive Fourier decomposition. This is a frequency domain with an adaptive method, and this is also a good technique. And Switzky-Gley filter. This is also one of the very important filter which is used in various literatures. And this one, if we are doing a signal processing, we should be well aware of this filter as well. We need to really learn this filter as well, because this filter, Switzky-Gulai filter, is used in many kind of filtration. I'm not going into the details. Maybe I will create a detailed video about that. The next thing is threshold method for high frequency noise detection. Obviously, it is a simplest and common technique to threshold value and neglect everything beyond that threshold value. The Kalman filters. The Kalman filters are used in most of the time when we have a gyroscope or accelerometer data. We mostly use the Kalman filters there. In the gyroscopes are mostly used in quadcopters and other aviation. So Kalman filters have most application over there, but it is still used for ECG signal denoising as well. Then we have a Bayesian filter framework, fastest technique to compute the Bayesian. Then we have a wavelet technique, which they also used, the clustering of morphological features, and neural networks. So, very recent attempts, including arrhythmia heart classification using deep learning models, they cited a research paper which is classifying the arrhythmia heart disease using deep neural network and QRS characteristics identification using sport vector machine. These methods. So here in the passage, we learned about a lot of techniques that are being used in ECG denoising literature. So for we will summarize that: adaptive filters, the ICA, which is independent component analysis; empirical mode decomposition, which is EMD; adaptive Fourier decomposition; Switzky-Gulai filter; the threshold method for high frequency noise detection; the Kalman filters; the Bayesian filters; wavelet techniques; clustering morphological features, and neural networks, and some kind of sport vector machine for QRS characteristic in identification. So I will also like to look into paper because it seems really interesting to me that they use applied as SVM to identify the QRS characteristics of ECG. So I would definitely like to check it out. So often do not take into account the problem of very high level of noise present in ECGs. Similarly, a first attempt to use deep learning based on the long short-term memory models for noise rejection in ECG was proposed, while in encoders were investigated, but they did not consider drifting noise. So this is another important point, that although the encoder models were discussed, but they can't consider the you know, the drifting noise into that. So the ECG signal itself, this heavy and drifting noise is common in wearable sensors. So if someone is preparing for a wearable ECG, the drifting noise and the motion artifacts, these are very common noises, and we need to take care of that. Therefore, in this paper, we investigated several DL models for removal and rejection of such kind of noises in ECG signal. So the paper is structured as follows. The DL models are presented together with the wavelet methods in section number 2. So let's first talk about the deep learning models. In the first deep learning model investigated is based on convolution neural network implemented in MATLAB. So they use MATLAB to for the CNN. CNN have been used for before for noise detection in ECG. There is also a research paper which use CNN for noise detection, but not yet for ECG reconstruction. Okay, so they said that although the CNN was used for noise detection, but they do not reconstruct the original ECG for denoising. So they present a CNN model was obtained by experiment, and it consists of six two-dimensional convolution layers, each having 36 filters with kernel size of 19 by 1 per filter. The first layer is an input layer of size 30,000 by 1 by 1 with zero center normalization, and each convolution layer has neuron that connect to part of the input feature or connect to the output of the previous layer. The step size for the kernel is 1 by 1, in which the padding is introduced so that the output is the same size as the input. So that is kind of encoder decoder architecture. Each convolution layer is followed by a batch normalization layer with 36 channels. So we want to do that so that we can't do overfitting. So we have to do a batch normalization, a rectified linear unit, ReLU layer, and an average pooling layer with stride of 4 and pooling size of 2. So that's an overall architecture of CNN base. The succession of these layers reduce the dimensionality of the input ECG signal sequence. So they try to reduce the ECG signal like this. So before the final regression output layer, the signal goes through a fully connected layer of regression. So they pass through a regression layer, which is a fully connected layer, and that's how they um, get the final output. Here is a picture of that. They have an image input, convolution layer, batch normalization, ReLU unit, and finally the fully connected layer and a regression output. They also created a LSTM based model, but we are not going to discuss an LSTM based model. We will simply keep our focus on CNN based model, and we'll come back to it, the LSTM, once we fully grasp the concept of CNN applied into our denoising. Because today I put a video about a sound speaker identification problem with the help of CNN based models, and we feed the MEL spectrogram to it. So we will just see how much we can get out of CNN. Before jumping into some other architecture, it will give us a full idea of what CNN is, how we can use them, and how we can use them for our full potential. For the optimizer, they are explaining that they used the Adam optimizer, and with a batch training data size of 300, they have batch training size of 300. It was also noticed that the obtained CNN performance did not change with much with increased batch size. So they stick with the 300 batch size, and they investigated that if they increase that batch size, the performance is not much increased. This is another crucial point. And for the error, they simply use the root mean square error. This one is a one of the simplest, but it works in their kind of environment. With 40 epochs, they trained it with the 40 epochs of training, which took 10 minutes. Okay, so the whole training goes just 10 minutes, which is pretty fast. For the scope of the investigation, the CNN model was also left to iterate longer to 200 epochs, okay, which took 58 minutes to reach an average RMS value of 0.029 over the same testing that dataset. So they run it for 200 and it took 58 minutes to reach 200 epochs. The CNN model was implemented in the MATLAB environment, and they use a GPU. So that makes sense. The second DL model is based on the LSTM. So we are not going into the detail of the LSTM. Right now, we are only focused on the CNN based models. But the wavelet transformation, they also use the wavelet method based on the empirical Bayesian method with Cauchy period to implement in MATLAB as a V denoise function. They have a W denoise function in MATLAB for the wavelet denoising. They compared their results with that. Now come a part of a dataset. What kind of dataset they use for denoising? Uh, three datasets were used. They used total three dataset. Two comprise a synthetic data generation with the software, while the third dataset is real dataset. Okay, so they synthesize a dataset. They created their own dataset like a simulated ECG signal. But a third dataset was a real dataset which contains an actual ECG recorded with the patients, and each data was divided into training 3 by 4 and the testing dataset 1 by 4. The first synthetic data has 6,888 clean ECG signals of duration of 10 seconds with 30,000 samples per ECG signal, because the sampling rate was 3 kilohertz, which was varied between 57 to 67 heartbeats per minute as a test case scenario. Um, if I would think of that, I would just downsample it. I would not keep 1 second for 30,000 samples of an ECG. But um, good for them. Heartbeats per minute. As a test case scenario, the voltage varies between 1 millivolt to 3 millivolts. So there is an example ECG signal. The voltage varies, and the P wave associates the construction or depolarization of the human heart arteria. QRS complex, the contraction or depolarization. Okay, so that was the overall ECG waveform that they have, and real ECG signal affected by electrode motion artifacts. They demonstrated it here, and they use the MITBIH arrhythmia database, and they use WFDB package. So for the first synthetic data, the prediction shows that the CNN model is able to recover the original signal with the RMS value of 0.01. And for the second data set, the LSTM prediction, and here you can see the denoise data. So they get pretty much good accuracy with this. So that's all for this paper, and we will see an overall idea of how we implemented a CNN for denoising, and we learned some denoising techniques and how they approach the data set. So I think that's all for today's stream. I don't want it to go too long. So